There spits a moment in every thoughtful life, often quiet, rarely dramatic, when the world loses its obviousness. You're walking home, or stirring your tea, or staring blankly out a window, and suddenly a strange thought rises like mist. Why am I doing any of this? Not just this task, this job, this day, but all of it. Why go on living? We don't like to speak this aloud. It's too raw, too revealing, but inside it festers. The ancient ache of meaninglessness isn't a modern invention. It's haunted philosophers, peasants, kings, and poets alike. And for one man, a literary giant, a celebrated thinker, and a soul in anguish, this question shattered everything. His name was Lev Tolstoy. By the time Tolstoy turned 50, he was globally revered. He had wealth, family, prestige, and two of the greatest novels ever written. And yet, in the solitude of his mind, he was gripped by a terrifying truth. My question, that which at the age of 50 brought me to the verge of suicide, was the simplest of questions. What will come of what I am doing today, or shall do tomorrow? What will come of my whole life? This wasn't a philosophical puzzle for him. It was a knife at the throat. The question of meaning had become unbearable. Tolstoy's journey through this question wasn't just personal, it became a map, a deeply spiritual, psychological, and philosophical search for what makes life meaningful or meaningless. In this video, we'll follow that path. We'll explore 6 key revelations from Tolstoy's Crisis, each one offering a practical insight, a philosophical grounding, and a challenge to the way we live today. And here lies the paradox. How can a man who seemingly had it all find life unlivable? Along the way, we'll weave in ideas from existential thinkers like Kierkegaard, the spiritual depths of Eastern mysticism, and modern psychological perspectives that mirror Tolstoy's transformation. If you have ever felt that quiet panic, if you've ever wondered whether your life is moving toward anything real, if you've ever been haunted by the question, what sets the point? Let's begin where Tolstoy began, at the edge of the abyss. Then this journey is for you. The illusion of success and the hidden despair beneath it. There's a strange silence that settles in when you get everything you ever wanted, not the noise of celebration, but the quiet of disillusionment. Imagine being Lev Tolstoy in his 50s. You've written War and Peace, Anna Karenina. The world calls you a genius. You live on a vast estate. You have a loving wife, a large family, loyal readers, and the admiration of Europe's intellectual elite. Why should I do anything? And yet, you wake up each morning with a thought that makes it hard to breathe. Tolstoy described this inner collapse not as depression, but as a total failure of meaning. Life, he wrote, felt like a stupid, mean trick played on me by somebody. He became afraid of carrying a rope or walking near a cliff, not because he wanted to die, but because he might, and part of him welcomed it. How could someone so admired feel so empty? Here we uncover the first truth. External success does not protect us from existential despair. In fact, it may even amplify it. Tolstoy's breakdown echoes the work of Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher of inwardness. Kierkegaard warned of a condition he called the despair of the successful, a state where a person builds their entire identity on something external, and then, once it's all in place, realizes it doesn't touch the real hunger inside. He called it the sickness unto death, a spiritual sickness, not of the body, but of the self, a disconnection from one's deepest being. We still see this today. The burned out entrepreneur, the artist adored by millions but haunted at night, the parent who gave everything to their children only to ask, "Who am I now?" They did everything right, but the soul doesn't obey that script. Tolstoy's despair wasn't irrational. It was the natural result of building life on unstable ground. He had tried to anchor his meaning in greatness, approval, legacy, all things that in the quiet of his mind felt hollow. He wrote, "What is all this for? What will come of my life? Even if I become more famous than Gogol or Shakespeare, death will come. And then what?" In psychological terms, we might say Tolstoy had achieved extrinsic success, but lost touch with intrinsic value. The ladder he climbed didn't just lead nowhere, it leaned against the wrong wall. So, what do we do with this? It's easy to believe the myth that once you're rich, loved, or successful, meaning will follow. But Tolstoy's story cracks that myth open. It asks us to look now, not later, at where we're placing our sense of worth. Are we living from the outside in or the inside out? This is the beginning of wisdom, recognizing that the more we chase, more money, more admiration, more legacy, often can't fill the part of us that longs for meaning. Tolstoy didn't find the answer here, but he found the right question. And sometimes that's the first step out of the abyss. Why striving can make us feel more lost, not less. There sips a powerful modern myth, one we rarely question. Keep going, keep improving. You'll get there. Work harder, be smarter, achieve more. And someday, maybe when you hit that next milestone or unlock your full potential, the feeling will change. You'll finally be fulfilled, at peace. This is the myth of progress as salvation, and for much of his life, Tolstoy believed in it. He threw himself into projects, disciplines, systems, trying to refine his character, perfect his art, reform education, fix society. He was always becoming something, but never being. Until one day he saw the truth. No matter how much I worked, or how much I learned, or how much I wrote, the abyss inside me remained. That sips when the myth collapsed. This collapse mirrors the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer, a thinker Tolstoy never formally endorsed, but whose dark clarity haunted the same ground. Schopenhauer described life as ruled by the will, a blind, ceaseless striving that pushes all creatures to survive, reproduce, compete, and chase more. But here's the paradox. The moment we get what we want, the satisfaction disappears. We're hungry again. The wheel keeps turning. A cycle with no exit. Desire eth fulfillment. Emptiness to new desire. Schopenhauer wrote, Tolstoy too began to suspect that more knowledge, more refinement, more ambition, even more goodness, couldn't answer the cry of the soul. In fact, they might just distract us from it. All striving springs from want or deficiency, but no satisfaction is lasting. It merely gives a new form to the same suffering. What if you're accelerating in the wrong direction? Let that bring this home. Modern culture teaches us that growth is always good, that a life moving forward is a life well lived. But Tolstoy Sip's crisis raises a chilling question. Tolstoy began to see this progress not as a path to truth, but a form of distraction, an endless climb designed to keep us from asking the one question that stops the whole system. We chase productivity, self improvement, optimization, But what are we improving for? What is the destination? You can run on a treadmill forever and still be going nowhere. What is this all for? He stopped writing novels. He turned away from the Russian elite. He began seeking something still, something honest, something outside the hamster wheel of better, faster, not because he gave up, but because he saw through it. Progress is not always meaningful. Sometimes it's a mask for meaninglessness. True meaning begins when we stop climbing, stop escaping, and sit with the discomfort of not knowing. This is the second awakening. Only then can something real emerge. If you're finding this journey valuable so far, and these questions resonate with your own, consider subscribing. Each week, we explore timeless truths like these, slowly and deeply, with care. What Tolstoy discovered when reason failed. In the deepest part of his crisis, Tolstoy turned to reason desperately. What do I know that one step be destroyed by death? He scoured the sciences, philosophy, and history, searching for some objective answer to the meaning of life. He asked, everything he studied came back empty. Philosophy pointed out that no answer could be proven beyond doubt. Biology told him he was a collection of cells destined to decay. History showed that even the greatest civilizations crumbled into dust. He described it like being trapped in a room with no exit. The more he thought, the darker it became. And then something unexpected happened. Tolstoy began to notice that the people around him, especially peasants, farmers, the poor, didn't seem tortured by this question. They worked, loved, prayed, and died with peace. He wrote, they lived as if they knew the meaning of life, and their answer was clear. It was faith. Everyone lives by faith, even those who claim not to. At first, he resisted. Faith seemed irrational, unscientific, childish, but slowly, painfully, he realized. The psychologist William James made a similar claim in his famous lecture, The Will to Believe. He argued that in matters of ultimate concern, the meaning of life, the existence of God, the moral shape of the universe, we must act before we have certainty. James said, we cannot escape the necessity of choosing, and not to choose is itself a choice, not blindly, but bravely, even if that something is undefined. Tolstoy came to see that the rejection of faith wasn't neutral, it was just another belief, often one of despair. To say life has no meaning is not a fact, but a worldview, a kind of dark faith. He realized that to live at all requires trust in something. There's a quiet power in this insight. Many of us were taught that faith is for the weak, that truth must be provable, logical, measurable. But the most important truths, love, beauty, hope, meaning, can't be proven. They must be lived into. Tolstoy came to believe that the peasant's faith, though simple, was more honest than the intellectual's doubt. It grounded their lives in something deeper than reason, a felt sense that life was worth living, even if they couldn't explain why. So, what does this mean for us? It means that you already have a faith system, whether you name it or not. It might be faith in progress, in love, in the future, in your children, in beauty, in science, in the unfolding of life, in God. Tolstoy's awakening here wasn't religious in the conventional sense. It wasn't about dogma. It was about discovering that meaning can't be reasoned into existence. It must be received, like a gift, and the posture that receives it is faith. The question is not if you believe, but what you believe in and whether it sustains you. This is the third shift. Faith is not a crutch, it is a condition of being human. To live meaningfully is not to prove life matters, it is to live as if it does, and to let that faith shape how we walk through the world. Next, we'll explore where Tolstoy began to see this meaning most clearly, not in ideas, but in the humble, ordinary moments of daily life. How Tolstoy found truth in the everyday after years of chasing meaning in books, fame, philosophy, and spiritual struggle. Tolstoy discovered something quietly radical. Tolstoy began to watch how the people who worked his land, farmers, blacksmiths, washerwomen, lived with a kind of peace he could not explain. They did not question the universe. They did not spiral into existential dread. They woke with the sun, tilled the soil, raised children, knelt in prayer, sang, wept, rested, died. Not in their words, but in their lives. The answer had been with the peasants all along. There was no grandeur, and yet there was something sacred. He began to see that truth lives in simplicity, not as an idea, but as a way of being. This realization turned him toward the mystical heart of Christianity, not the institutional form he once mocked, but the lived faith of the people. It also drew him closer to Eastern thought, especially the Taoist and Buddhist traditions, which emphasize presence, humility, and harmony with life as it is. Just live, just be, just participate in the dance. Where Western thought often asks, what is the purpose of life? Eastern thought responds. Tolstoy started to see meaning not as a thing to possess, but as a practice, something revealed in the rhythm of ordinary life when lived with awareness. He wrote, the only real life is the life of the simple, the laboring people, in which faith is not argued but lived. Let Seps pause here. Think of a parent feeding their child, a friend sitting quietly beside another Seps grief. In our search for meaning, we often look up to big dreams, big answers, big goals. But what if meaning flows downward into the small, the repeated, the unglamorous? These are not achievements. They are acts of love, and love Tolstoy began to see is the soil where meaning grows. A gardener tending to the same patch of earth for decades. There's spes a humility in this truth, and release in the way a child laughs. Tolstoy didn't stop asking big questions, but he stopped demanding that the answers come wrapped in prestige or brilliance. Instead, he began to find them in places he once overlooked, in the feel of bare feet on soil, in the rituals that keep us human. He even said that watching a peasant woman pray with her worn hands and bowed head gave him more clarity than years of theological study. This is the fourth insight. The philosopher Simone Weil once said, meaning is not something we find, it's something we create, with attention, with care, with love. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Next, we'll turn to the revelation that deepened this clarity even more facing death, fully and without flinching. Tolstoy might have agreed, because in the end, the ordinary wasn't ordinary at all. It was luminous once he knew how to see it, how confronting death awakens us to life. Lev Tolstoy once wrote a short story, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, that in many ways captures the essence of his own crisis. In it, a respected judge falls ill and realizes he is dying. But what truly torments him isn't the pain, it's the sudden, horrifying realization that he never really lived. That question burns through Avon Iliad's as he lies on his deathbed, surrounded by people who avoid the truth, pretending he's getting better. What if my whole life has been wrong? I could give no rational meaning to any single action or to my whole life. The only absolute knowledge attainable by man is that life is meaningless, but I could not live without meaning. This story wasn't just fiction, it was Tolstoy's own nightmare. He wrote during his existential collapse, and here he met the final wall death. What do we do with the knowledge that everything we build, love, achieve, will one day vanish? Many philosophies try to soften this, but Tolstoy refused to look away. Like the Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, he believed that confronting death honestly was essential for any real life, not as a morbid obsession, but as a clarifying fire. And in this sense, Tolstoy's crisis became a kind of awakening. The Stoic phrase memento mori, remember you must die, isn't meant to depress us, it's meant to burn away illusion, to strip life down to what matters. He saw that most people, like even Illich, build their lives on assumptions that collapse under death-sep's gaze. That success makes you safe, that comfort equals happiness, that tomorrow is guaranteed. But when death becomes real, not as an abstract idea, but as a living presence, everything false falls away. If a man has learned to live with the thought of death before him, he ceases to be a slave, he becomes free. Tolstoy wrote, "This is the paradox. To live fully, we must die before we die. We must allow the part of us that clings to ego, to control, to illusion to dissolve. Only then can we begin again, lighter, clearer, more honest." This echoes the mystical traditions across cultures, from the Christian idea of dying to the self, to the Buddhist concept of ego death, to Rumi Set's line, die before you die, so when death comes, you will not die. Tolstoy's fear didn't disappear, but it transformed. Death was no longer a terrifying interruption. It was a teacher, a fierce one, but a necessary one. So, what does this mean for you? It means you don't have to wait for catastrophe or illness to wake up. You can begin now by remembering that you are mortal. This is not morbid, it's Sep's sacred, not to make you anxious, but to make you aware. What would shift if you lived with death beside you, not as an enemy, but as a silent companion? Because only when we realize that everything can be taken do we begin to cherish what we have. This is the fifth awakening. Death doesn't destroy meaning, it creates. It gives weight to our days. It sharpens our love. It humbles our pride. Tolstoy emerged from this confrontation with something unexpected, a kind of freedom. He no longer needed to achieve immortality. He needed only to live truly and humbly in the time he had. In our final core insight, we'll explore where that path led him, beyond the self, into a life lived for something far greater. The final surrender that gave Tolstoy his life back. In the final chapter of Tolstoy's Crisis, something quietly seismic occurred. He let go, not in despair, but in a kind of surrender, not to hopelessness, but to life itself. After all his searching, reasoning, striving, and suffering, Tolstoy came to a simple but profound realization. The self, the ego, the isolated I that demands answers, control, and certainty was the problem, and meaning could not be found by feeding it, only by releasing it. He wrote, this wasn't just a spiritual metaphor. It changed the entire shape of his existence. When I ceased to seek the foundation of life in my own self and began to look for it in the source from which life sprang, then only did life become meaningful. Tolstoy gave away much of his wealth. He simplified his clothing and food. He began living in closer communion with nature, with peasants, with the ordinary. He renounced ownership of his most famous novels, believing art was not to glorify the artist, but to serve the world. This final awakening is deeply resonant with the teachings of Christian kenosis, the emptying of the self in love, and with Buddhist anatta, the idea that the self is an illusion and clinging to it is the root of suffering. And most of all, he began to live not for his individual fulfillment, but for the good of others. In modern terms, it also aligns with self transcendent psychology, as described by thinkers like Viktor Frankl and Abraham Maslow, the idea that the deepest human fulfillment comes not from self actualization, but from losing oneself in service, purpose, and love, from isolation to connection. Think of this as a movement, from consumption to contribution. Let's be honest, the modern world doesn't make this easy. Tolstoy realized that the more he tried to grasp life for himself, the more it slipped through his fingers. But when he let himself be part of something larger, nature, humanity, God, life opened like a flower. From asking, "What do I want?" to "What does life ask of me?" Was it constantly encouraged to express ourselves, find ourselves, be ourselves? What if you were never meant to carry the weight of meaning alone, but to find it in participation, in devotion, in relationship, in love? But what if the self isn't something to obsess over, but something to offer? This is the sixth and final awakening. Tolstoy's final revelation was not the end of his search, but the beginning of a different kind of life, one marked not by certainty, but by trust, not by control, but by humility, not by achieving greatness, but by serving what is good. You are not the center, but you are a part, and that is more than enough. It is the only way the self finds its true home. To live for the whole, to love what is greater than you, is not a loss of identity. And now, in our final part, we'll gather all these insights and return one last time to the question that started it all. What Tolstoy taught us about the meaning of life. A man at the height of worldly success, acclaimed, wealthy, beloved, finds himself staring into the abyss, asking the most devastating question a person can ask. Let's return to where we began. What is the point of it all? And the answer at first is silence. But from that silence, from despair, doubt, collapse, Tolstoy carved out a path that countless souls have followed since. A path not of dogma, but of honesty, not of perfection, but of transformation. He showed us that the search for meaning is not a luxury. It's not something reserved for philosophers or monks. It's the most human thing we do. Let's revisit the six insights from Tolstoy's Sep's journey. Having everything means nothing. Success without inner truth leads to despair. The world cannot fill a soul that has forgotten itself. Faith is not irrational. It's inevitable. We all live by some kind of faith. The question is whether yours brings you peace or hides your fear. The lie of endless progress. More, better, faster is not a destination. It's a distraction. Stop climbing and ask, where is this taking me? Ordinary life holds extraordinary meaning. The sacred is not far away. It lives in the mundane if you know how to see. You must die. before you die. Let the ego go. Let illusions go. Death clarifies life. It is not the enemy, but the teacher. These were not academic ideas for Tolstoy. They were lifelines. They pulled him back from the edge, and they might do the same for you. Live for the whole, not the self. Meaning is not found in what you get, it's found in what you give. Love and become part. But here's the truth: you are not just a listener in this story, you are its next chapter. Tolstoy Sip's life invites us to stop postponing the question, to stop waiting for some future moment when things will finally make sense. What do you believe in right now? Instead, it asks, what kind of life is worth living, even if it all ended tomorrow? What can you let go of? What can you give yourself? The world does not need more brilliance, more noise, more polished perfection. It needs more honest, searching souls, more people willing to sit with the hard questions, more people living not for ego, but for love. So here sips my invitation. Live the kind of life that whispers back to you, even in the silence. Yes, this mattered. Live not to escape death, but to be fully alive while you're here.